"Let go of my mom and I'll make you walk," said the black boy. The court laughed. Then, the impossible Malik Henderson stood up from the wooden bench, his small frame almost swallowed by the courtroom's vastness. His voice cut through the murmurs and shuffling papers like a blade through still air. "Judge Cole," he said, steady and certain, "if you free my mother, I will teach you to walk again." The sentence hung in the room like smoke no one could breathe through. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then came the laughter, sharp, cruel, echoing from the back rows where reporters sat with pens paused mid-air. Even the bailiff smirked. How could a child promise something so absurd? Sunlight broke through the blinds, streaking across the judge's polished bench. Dust particles floated like slow confessions in the air. The smell of paper, sweat, and old varnish filled the courthouse. A place that felt less like a house of justice and more like a room where hope came to die quietly. On the defense side sat Tanya Henderson, Malik's mother. Her uniform still carried faint traces of bleach and floor wax, the scent of the community bank where she worked as a janitor for 9 years. Now that same bank accused her of stealing $42,000. Tanya insisted on her innocence, but her words found no allies. Across the room, Prosecutor Frank Dillard stood tall, smug, rehearsed, waving false evidence like gospel. Judge Raymond Cole, revered yet feared, observed from his elevated chair, his wheelchair wheels gleaming beneath the oak panel. Power and pity wrapped around him like twin shadows. Tanya's public defender leaned back unbothered. His files were thin, his effort thinner. Malik's hands tightened on the bench, knuckles whitening. He watched his mother's shoulders tremble as another accusation was thrown her way. But behind his stillness burned something steady, a plan no one could read. The laughter around him faded, replaced by the faint hum of ceiling fans. Malik lowered his gaze, a faint smile forming at the corner of his mouth. No one knew why that boy looked so calm. No one knew what he was about to do next. The metal door creaked as Malik stepped into the holding cell. The faint hum of fluorescent lights buzzed above his head, and the air smelled of rust and cold resignation. His mother sat on a narrow bench, her hands folded tightly in her lap. When she looked up, her eyes carried both fear and something heavier, acceptance. "Malik," Tanya whispered, her voice barely rising above the sound of distant footsteps. "You cannot fight what you cannot change. Some things in this world are not made for people like us." He stood silently, the words slicing through him. For a moment he looked like a child again, small, powerless, outmatched. Then his jaw tightened. "Maybe," he said softly, "but I will find a way." That night, while the city slept, Malik sat on the worn couch of their small apartment, the glow of an old laptop flickering across his face. He watched courtroom videos on repeat, replaying every word of defense attorneys who fought for justice with nothing but truth and persistence. He took notes in a spiral-bound notebook, underlining phrases he barely understood yet somehow believed in. Every night, he learned something new, how appeals worked, what reasonable doubt meant, how bias could twist the truth until it snapped. At school, the world reminded him of his place. Classmates whispered when he passed. Some laughed at the criminal's son. Others avoided him entirely. Malik endured it all with quiet focus. While others played at recess, he sat alone under the oak tree, earbuds in, listening to court hearings as if they were songs of survival. One afternoon, he recorded himself on his mother's old phone. His voice trembled but stayed firm. "Truth walks," he said, "even when people cannot." It became his mantra, something to hold on to when the world refused to believe him. By the third week, the spark of an idea had turned into something real. His notebook filled with names: Judge Raymond Cole, Frank Dillard, Evan Brooks. Each name circled, annotated, connected by lines like a web forming in silence. He studied their cases, their reputations, and every rumor that floated through the courthouse halls. He knew now that something was off, not just with the evidence, but with the system itself. Late one evening, as he packed his school bag, he slid a small black device between his textbooks. It was a cheap voice recorder he had bought from a pawn shop for $5. He zipped the bag shut, a strange calm settling over him. The boy who once sat powerless in a courtroom was no longer waiting for justice. He was building it, and no one, not even Judge Cole, knew what was coming. The courthouse smelled of polish and paper when Malik walked in, holding a small envelope addressed to the office of Judge Raymond Cole. He was supposed to deliver it and leave, nothing more. But as he turned the corner near the clerk's office, a familiar voice stopped him. Behind the half-closed door, Evan Brooks, the judge's assistant, was laughing with another clerk. "That janitor's case?" he sneered. "She is lucky she even had a job there. People like her do not belong around money." The other man chuckled. "Still funny her son keeps showing up here. Thinks he can save her." Malik froze. The laughter stung, but more than that, it revealed something cruel and careless beneath the courthouse's clean surface. He reached into his backpack, pressing a small button on his recorder. The red light blinked silently as every word etched itself into memory. When the conversation ended, Malik slipped away unnoticed, his pulse pounding. He knew what he had now was small, but it was a beginning. That night he sat at the public library, scrolling through old articles until he found the name again, Grace Monroe, a retired civil rights attorney who had once brought down a corrupt police division. Her face stared back from a black and white photo, sharp-eyed and unyielding. Malik typed out an email on his school computer. "My name is Malik Henderson. My mother has been accused of a crime she did not commit. I think the people in court are lying. I have recordings. Please help me." He hesitated before pressing send, unsure if anyone would even read it. 2 days later, Grace Monroe appeared at the county jail unannounced. Her gray coat brushed the floor as she walked in, briefcase in hand. When Tanya saw her, confusion crossed her face. "I am not here as your lawyer," Grace began quietly. "I am here because of your son." Later, when she met Malik, she saw the spark immediately. Not defiance, but clarity. He spoke with a calm that made her uneasy. "You believe your mother is innocent," she said. "Belief is not enough, Malik. You need proof." "I will find it," he replied. "I already started." Grace studied him for a long moment, then sighed. "All right, but we do this the right way. Clean, traceable, and legal. You bring me something real." Days turned into weeks. Together they traced bank transfers, reviewed payroll logs, and listened to courthouse gossip disguised as clerical chatter. Malik slipped his recorder into offices, break rooms, and hallways. Grace filed quiet requests for financial statements, her reputation granting her access she no longer wanted, but still wielded like a weapon. But as the days stretched on, their leads dried up. Grace's confidence faltered. "Maybe we were wrong," she whispered one evening. "Maybe there is nothing left to uncover." Malik shook his head, eyes unwavering. "There is one last thing," he said softly. "And when I show you, everything will change." Grace did not know it yet, but the boy's certainty would soon turn the entire courthouse upside down. The next morning, Malik waited near the courthouse parking lot, his backpack slung over one shoulder and a small flash drive hidden in his hand. When Evan Brooks walked by, talking on his phone, Malik stepped forward quickly. "Sir, I think you dropped this," he said, holding out the drive. Brooks barely looked at him. "Oh? Must have fallen out of my case," he muttered, snatching it without suspicion. Malik nodded politely, pretending to leave, but inside his heart raced. That flash drive was not lost. It carried a small recorder hidden inside, one that would capture everything the man said when plugged into his computer. Hours later, in the quiet of his office, Brooks leaned back in his chair. The faint click of the recorder went unnoticed. "You know, Frank," Brooks said over the phone, his voice dripping with arrogance, "the judge never checks these files himself. I move a few numbers here, a few there, and no one sees it. The extra money? Well, it ends up right where it should, in our hands." Frank Dillard's voice responded faintly through the receiver, laughing. "You better hope that janitor never figures it out. She'll be cleaning floors in prison next." Every word was caught. Every lie sealed its own fate. That evening, Grace Monroe sat in her apartment reviewing a new message that had arrived from Malik, a short text. "Check the drive." She plugged it in, and as the recording played, she went completely still. When it ended, she exhaled shakily and muttered, "We have them." The next morning, Grace walked into the federal courthouse under a new storm of purpose. Her old instincts returned, sharp, disciplined, fearless. She contacted a trusted clerk from her past, one who had quietly battled corruption before. After a tense conversation behind closed doors, the woman confirmed what Grace feared and Malik suspected. There were irregularities in Judge Cole's personal accounts. Money had been rerouted through fake transactions, the same dates tied to Tanya Henderson's supposed theft. Malik knew none of this was over. He stayed quiet even with his mother. Each night, he sat beside her during visiting hours, listening as she told him to stay out of trouble. He would smile, promise he was fine, and change the subject. Meanwhile, Grace worked in silence. She filed for a surprise federal injunction, a legal move that would bring the case into a higher court without warning. It was risky, but time was running out. One afternoon, as Malik waited outside the prosecutor's office, he overheard Frank Dillard's voice through the half-open door. "That woman's a career thief," he said coldly. "She should thank us for not giving her more time." Malik's hands clenched, nails digging into his palms. But instead of anger, something steadier rose inside him. Clarity. He whispered to himself, "No truth needs shouting. It only needs a witness." And now, he had enough truth to make giants fall. The courthouse was packed that morning. Every seat filled, every whisper edged with curiosity. Cameras lined the back wall, waiting for a spectacle. Tanya Henderson sat at the defense table, her shoulders heavy with exhaustion. She had stopped hoping for miracles. Across the room, Frank Dillard leaned back smugly, flipping through his papers like a man already certain of victory. The heavy doors creaked open. Grace Monroe entered, walking with quiet authority, her silver hair pulled neatly back. Beside her, Malik Henderson followed, calm, expression unreadable. The sound of their footsteps drew every eye in the room. Judge Raymond Cole looked up from the bench, surprise flickering in his cold stare. "Back again, boy," he said with a crooked grin. "Still want to teach me to walk?" Malik did not answer. He stood still, eyes steady, neither bowing nor reacting. Grace placed her files on the table and faced the judge. "Your Honor, before proceeding, I have a motion that cannot wait." Cole sighed impatiently. "A motion from an unlisted counsel? This is highly irregular." Grace's tone was calm but carried power. "It is not irregular when the federal court demands it." She handed over a stamped document. "As of this morning, this case has been transferred to federal jurisdiction due to an identified conflict of interest." A wave of murmurs swept through the courtroom. Dillard's smirk faded. Cole's hand froze midair. "Conflict of interest?" he repeated, his voice cracking slightly. Grace opened a small recorder on the table. "Perhaps this will explain." She pressed play. Brooks's voice filled the room. "The judge never checks these files himself. I move a few numbers and the money ends up where it should, in our hands." Then came Dillard's laughter. "That janitor will be cleaning floors in prison next." The sound of those words changed everything. The courtroom fell into stunned silence before erupting into gasps and shouts. Cole's gavel struck the bench repeatedly. "Order! Order in this court!" But the order was gone. Reporters scribbled frantically. Dillard shot to his feet, shouting, "This is illegal evidence!" "You cannot," Grace cut him off sharply. "We can and we did. You forgot to cover your tracks." At that moment, the side door opened. Federal marshals entered, walking straight toward Dillard. The prosecutor's face turned pale as one of them read him his rights. Meanwhile, Evan Brooks, seated near the witness stand, buried his face in his hands. Under pressure, his voice cracked. "It was me," he stammered. "I forged the transfers. I only did what I was told." The crowd erupted again. Tanya looked at Malik, disbelief in her eyes. Grace placed a hand gently on her shoulder. Judge Cole struck the gavel again, his composure unraveling. "This session," he began, but Malik stepped forward before he could finish. "Your Honor," Malik said quietly, "there is one more thing." He pulled out another flash drive and handed it to Grace. She nodded and played it through the speaker. Cole's own voice echoed through the room, mocking and cruel. "Kids like him think justice is theirs. But this world does not belong to them." The hall went silent. No one spoke. Judge Cole's face drained of color. The symbol of authority he had clung to for years now trembled visibly before the crowd. The sound of his own words, arrogant, unguarded, had stripped him bare. By the time the federal agents approached the bench, his gavel rested quietly beside his hand, forgotten. The air in the courtroom feels heavier than stone. Tanya's arms tighten around her son, trembling with relief, the kind that steals your breath before it gives it back. Around them, whispers ripple through rows of wooden benches. Even those who mocked now sit frozen, unable to process what they just witnessed. Judge Raymond Cole grips the sides of his wheelchair. His lips part, but no words escape. Only the faint sound of his breath breaking under its own weight. For a moment, he is no longer the man who held power over others. He is a man haunted by the echo of his own cruelty. A shiver runs down his arm. His right hand twitches. The movement is small, almost invisible, but every pair of eyes catches it. The silence deepens. Then slowly, his legs begin to move beneath the dark fabric of his robe, stiff, hesitant, but undeniably alive. Gasps fill the room. One woman covers her mouth. A bailiff drops his pen. Even the reporters forget to write. The man who swore he would never walk again is now trembling as if life itself decided to return through him. Malik steps forward, calm and steady. His voice cuts through the stillness, soft but certain. "I told you I would make you walk again, Judge," he says. "Just not the way you expected." The words fall like a quiet verdict. Judge Cole stares at him, eyes wide with disbelief, then drops his gaze. For the first time, the man who once towered over everyone feels smaller than the boy standing before him. He nods faintly, shame and awe blending on his face. No one speaks for several long seconds. Even the ticking clock on the back wall seems to hold its breath. Malik takes his mother's hand, and together they walk past the judge's bench. Tanya's steps are slow, deliberate, almost sacred. A week later, the news breaks that Judge Raymond Cole has resigned from his post, citing medical and ethical reasons. Reporters say he walks now with the help of a cane, his once booming voice replaced by a silence that follows him everywhere. Evan Brooks is taken into custody for embezzlement. Cameras capture him covering his face as officers escort him away. His former charm disappears behind cold handcuffs. Frank Dillard, the proud prosecutor, is stripped of his license. His photo is removed from the courthouse wall, an empty frame left behind as quiet testimony. Outside, sunlight spills across the courthouse steps. Tanya stands at the top, her palms open, eyes lifted to the sky. For years, she scrubbed those very steps, wiping away other people's footprints. Today she walks down them free, her reflection glimmering in the marble beneath her feet. Behind her, Malik walks silently, not smiling, not celebrating, just breathing. Because some victories are too sacred for noise. 6 months later, the hum of Malik's small desk fills the room again. But this time, there is no clutter of case files, no sleepless worry, only a modest microphone and a glowing screen. His channel banner reads, "Justice at 12. Thousands of names flood the live chat, tiny hearts and messages scrolling faster than his eyes can follow. He adjusts the mic, his posture calm, his tone patient but sure. "Do not wait to grow up to stand for what is right," he says. "Injustice has no age, so neither should courage." The comments light up. Across the city and far beyond, his voice has become more than a story. It is a spark. A silent montage follows. News footage of courthouse reforms, staff training programs, and new oversight systems flashes across the screen. The same walls that once silenced people like his mother now echo with change. Then a single frame holds. Judge Raymond Cole, captured by a news camera outside a rehabilitation center. His face is thinner, his steps slow but steady, each one guided by a simple wooden cane. His legs have returned to him, but not his dignity. He learned to walk again, but only after standing before his own conscience. The shot fades to Tanya, watering small plants outside their modest new home. A breeze carries her laughter inside where Malik studies, his computer glowing softly. He pauses for a second, watching his mother smile, the kind of smile that only comes after surviving the storm. His final words drift like a promise. "Justice is not a miracle," he says. "It is the moment when truth stands up," and refuses to sit down.